Get some!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. I'm doing it from home today because I'm a little bit under the weather, and we've got some amazing stories for you guys today, including one of Trump's co-conspirators asking for immunity. That'll be a little bit later in the program, and obviously they averted the government shutdown and all the different things that flow from that. We'll discuss all of it in a minute. But before we do anything else, I've got a couple of big announcements for you guys. So announcement number one is that we are beginning Operation Hope. So I'm going to explain this more fully on tomorrow's program. And announcement number two is, yes, I am considering running for president. So I'm going to explain both of those real quick for you guys right now, and then we will continue to talk about it throughout the week. So Operation Hope has begun, and it's very, very simple. It's us collaborating, meaning us, the host of TYT, and you guys at home, the community, working together to come up with plans together, collaborate together, and then to execute those plans in the real world and in social media. So I'm gonna explain the mechanics of how we're going to do that. It's very simple. It's on the main page of our home site right now, tyt.com. And it's at this point just a discussion board where we start the ideas, okay? And then we will start to begin to do those ideas in the real world together. But I put up a blog post about the first project we want to do together, paid family leave, and trying to get that passed from the outside. So please check that out. And I'm gonna jump back into the discussion and start to organize as I have already a little bit. And so you guys know that we do the show 6 to 8 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. Eastern, of course, right here on youtube.com/theyoungturks and tyt.com/live. So we're gonna do our regular show today and on Monday. I'm sorry, on Tuesday. At the end of our regular show at 8 o'clock today, I'm gonna do a book reading. Tomorrow, I'm going to do Operation Hope and explain more fully what it is. I'm gonna show you an interview with Ro Khanna that begins to explain how we can make a difference in the world. And the whole idea is an audacious idea that us together, the TYT hosts and you guys, can make a difference in the world. And I believe that with every fiber of my being, and we're gonna prove it together. So that begins now. So now, in terms of the presidential campaign, that actually does not have to do with Operation Hope. It just happens to coincide at this time. Now, is it a campaign yet? No. Am I very seriously considering it? Yes. Have I done some work behind the scenes to effectuate it? Yes, I have. Okay. Does that mean I've made a final decision on it? No. It depends on some of those things that are afoot here to see if we can execute it and execute it properly in a way that we could actually win. So if you're wondering why in the world I would consider this, especially given the fact that I was not born in America, I'm a naturalized citizen, I'm gonna explain that for you. Let me just break this down real quick, and then I'm gonna ask you to participate in this decision throughout the week. So the reasons for potentially running are, by far and away, number one is, I believe Joe Biden's going to lose. And now I believe a lot of people think that Joe Biden is going to lose, and we can get a better candidate, and it could be me, but it could also be any of the governors, Governor Whitmer, Governor Newsom, Governor Shapiro, Governor Beshear. These are all amazing Democratic governors, and they could all easily beat Donald Trump. And finally, I am not the only one saying that. Now we have a whole host of people, from Bill Maher to James Carville to even Joe Scarborough, David Ignatius at the Washington Post, and they're beginning to catch on to what I've been saying for some time now, which is Joe Biden was a hero for beating Donald Trump last time, but if he sticks around when he's 13 points lower than he was last time, and he barely won the Electoral College by 44,000 votes, he's going to be incredibly selfish, and he will unfortunately turn into the villain, the guy who gave away democracy just because he wanted a slightly better legacy of a second term. So in a sense, if I go in, I would be a proxy not just for myself and not just for progressives, but to bring in any other candidate so we can actually beat Donald Trump. And as I've told you guys many, many times on the Young Turks, that is the overwhelming #1 goal. I believe Donald Trump is an actual fascist. I believe he tried to do a coup against America with this fake elector scheme. We've talked about it a lot. And I do not want to go quietly into that good night. And I do not want to run into that iceberg when I see the iceberg. So I'm going to do anything and everything possible to steer the ship away from the iceberg. So that is the overwhelming #1 priority. But #2, since I'm a naturalized citizen, there is this mythology that you cannot run for president, and I'm sick of it. It is definitely wrong. It is constitutionally wrong. Case law proves that it is wrong definitively, but conventional wisdom persists. There's about 25 million naturalized citizens in America, and the very first thing we always hear is, "Ha ha, you can't run for president." Well, it's a way of alienating us and making us feel like, oh, you guys aren't as American as we are. And it's absurd. The Supreme Court has ruled it is absurd, and there's very clear case law about it. Not about running for president, but the fact that naturalized citizens have 100% identical rights as US born citizens. And that is because the Constitution was amended by the 5th and 14th Amendments. So if all I do was run in any campaign or anyone else, and they finally got the Supreme Court to say, of course they could run for president, as our previous case law shows, then that would be a great service to the country as well, I believe. And by the way, just really quick, Ted Lieu is a United States congressman. In fact, he's my congressman. He came here from, his family came here from Taiwan when he was 3 years old. He's a colonel in the United States Air Force. Are we going to question his loyalty? We think he's more loyal to Taiwan. That's absurd. And in fact, the Supreme Court has said questioning people's loyalties like that is not only absurd, it's unconstitutional. I can give you countless examples. Patrick Bet-David, a show, a right-wing leaning show that I went on recently. He's the host of it. He's an Armenian Christian, immigrated during the Iranian Revolution. His family fled Iran. He then was served in the 101st Airborne. Is the idea that he's loyal to Iran instead of America? It's absurd. And again, it doesn't matter that it's absurd. It's unconstitutional, as the Supreme Court has ruled. So that would be another great reason to go in the race. But back to the main issue at hand, which is Trump and Biden and who's going to win this election. That is far, far more important than anything else. The third reason I'd run is to give you guys an honest, strong, progressive option. And so what do I mean by that? You know my strength. What I mean by that is I will do anything and everything to pass the laws that we care about. So I will not listen to congeniality or etiquette or any of that nonsense. There will be no talk of parliamentarians. And we will pass things like paid family leave, public option, higher minimum wage, etc. And number two, I'm honest. I'm not a regular politician. I don't really even want to do it. I love this job. This is the job I want to do. But for God's sake, isn't anyone going to argue for things that we all agree on? You've heard me, if you've watched Young Turks, say this 1,000 times. Paid family leave polls at 84%. What else do you need to fight for it, and to fight for it aggressively? So if it's someone like me, or perhaps literally me, I'm gonna fight like hell for you guys on incredibly popular positions. This should not be a novel concept, but unfortunately in American politics, it is. Everyone has their own agenda, no one has your agenda. So I will be honest, I will be strong, and yes, I'll be progressive. And if the mainstream media and others who usually savage progressives are concerned, oh my God, he might actually deliver for Americans and he's a progressive and not beholden to corporate rule, don't worry guys. If I get to 20 to 25%, every governor in the country is gonna come into this race, whether Joe Biden likes it or not. So everyone in Washington knows that, and that is another excellent reason to run. So, but having said all that, there are great difficulties, and we will talk about that in the upcoming week. And then, like I said, I might literally ask you to weigh in and maybe even decide. So stay tuned right here for that. And obviously an interesting week, an interesting circumstance we find ourselves in. But the most important point is Joe Biden has to win the race by 5 points. Any Democrat has to win the race by 5 points in order to win the Electoral College. And Joe Biden is nowhere near it and falling fast. So we have to act right now to get more Democratic candidates into the race, because we must defeat Trump. All right, that's our first segment. We're gonna take a quick break here. When we come back, all the stories that I promised you, including the government shutdown, what happened, why did the Democrats vote along with the Republicans, and so much more. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. We're gonna get to the regular news. Now also Mike Rendell and Jeff Gates with us, and thank you guys for signing up at Premium. We really, really appreciate you guys. And Chris Birch, who gifted 5 Young Turks memberships. Love you guys. Thank you for supporting us and each other. Anna.
All right, well, why don't we give you all an update on the civil trial that Donald Trump is now facing. Today was the first day. Let's get to it.
I think we're seeing something that we frankly did not expect. There's a camera in that courtroom. Was that supposed to be, or would they just be simply ushered out when we're gavelled to order?
There were initially cameras allowed during former President Donald Trump's first day at trial. This is the civil trial he's facing over allegations of financial fraud. Now, just as a quick refresher, just last week, the judge overseeing this trial ruled in a summary judgment that Trump and his co-defendants, which include his sons, did engage in financial fraud. We'll give you the details on that in just a moment. But New York State Attorney General Letitia James is in fact suing Trump for financial fraud. And about an hour before the moment that you're about to watch on tape, Trump's team put out an opposition research file on prosecutor Letitia James, which is part of the reason why I'm assuming she had the look on her face that you're about to see. Let's watch the video.
Quite frankly, I'm not too sure that both parties would want this. I think that Trump views this, the optics of this, as working to his advantage. Look, people looking at this live picture right now will be either filled with rage or they will be thrilled. And that's the problem, is that you have James now being shown in the background, you've got Trump in the foreground, and it fulfills the narrative on both sides. Trump is likely right. I mean, he's being shown in a sort of tag team series of prosecutions and civil lawsuits where one prosecutor tags another. They're all insisting on these trials occurring before the election.
Now, the voice that you heard in that tape was Jonathan Turley, who was speaking to Fox News at the time. Before I get to more details about what transpired in the courtroom today, Cenk, do you have any thoughts on the commentary you heard?
Yeah, so I think that Donald Trump not asking for a jury trial is going to turn into an epic disaster. In terms of Letitia James looking at him in an angry way, I mean, how would you look at him if he called you all those names, right? So, and I don't think that anybody who supports Donald Trump gets to complain about anyone else looking mean or angry or unhinged or anything along those lines. And so there's a lot more to this case, but Donald Trump is in real trouble. And almost every legal analyst, including all the conservative legal analysts, including Jonathan Turley, who you heard on that tape, agree this case is open and shut, and Donald Trump is going to lose an enormous amount of money. I'm not sure he has that much money to lose.
Right, and the prosecutors are looking for $250 million as part of the punishment for the financial fraud. So look, we're gonna get to the Oppo file that the Trump team released on Letitia James in just a moment. But before we do, I wanted to fill you in on more details about the unique nature of this trial. We'll get to the decision by the defense attorneys to move forward with this trial without a jury, which I agree seems to be a big mistake. Now, the judge that you also saw in the video is Judge Arthur Engoron, who is overseeing or presiding over the trial. He already ruled in that summary judgment last week that Trump, his adult sons, his businesses, and executives are liable for persistent and repeated financial fraud. Now, the civil trial is basically meant to resolve the other claims that prosecutor James has brought forward, which include falsifying business records, conspiracy to falsify business records, issuing false financial statements, conspiracy to falsify false financial statements, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. And so just to fill you in a little more, the allegation was that Donald Trump essentially inflated the value of his assets in order to secure favorable terms on loans or to obtain the loans in the first place, and also to obtain insurance. Now, those claims require the Attorney General to demonstrate that the false valuations mattered and that Trump acted with fraudulent intent. And that's according to what the Judge Engoron said. Trump's attorneys claim that what Trump engaged in was basically a victimless crime, which is real easy to say because it's harder to show a direct a causal relationship. But the fact of the matter is, when this type of fraud takes place, everyone else ends up paying a price for it in the form of higher fees, more expensive fees. So to say that it's a victimless crime is ridiculous if you ask me. Again, the lawsuit is seeking $250 million, the removal of the Trump family from the Trump organization's leadership, and sanctions that would essentially prevent Trump, his children, and his company from operating a business in the state of New York. Now, the Judge Engoron has already stripped the business certifications from Trump, the Trump organization, and the other defendants in his last ruling that included the summary judgment. But according to CNBC, it's still unclear if that means the Trump organization is now permanently unable to do business in New York, or if it will be basically legally reconstituted at some later date. Now, Trump has claimed that a disclaimer on his financial statements absolved him of any wrongdoing. He's also arguing that the value of his assets were not, in fact, exaggerated. He posted the following on Truth Social just last night. Engoron values Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida at $18 million when it is worth 50 to 100 times that amount. In other words, Trump is claiming that Mar-a-Lago is worth $900 million to $1.8 billion, which seems like a lot, but I have to be honest with you, I'm not too familiar with that property, how expansive it is, and I mean, it looks like it could be as much as $1 billion. I don't know. I'm not an expert on valuations in regard to real estate and resorts like that. But any comments so far, Cenk?
Yeah. So first of all, on Mar-a-Lago, I briefly worked in real estate. I'm not an expert in Palm Beach properties either, but there's a 0% chance that that is worth 900 million to 1.8 billion. It's the usual ridiculous hyperbole and exaggeration that Trump does, which is deeply ironic because he's in trouble in this case for fraudulently hyping up the value of his real estate. That thing, if it's 10 times more than 18 million, which it probably isn't, it's probably what the judge said it is. But if it was 10 times more, it'd be $180 million, and that would be very impressive. There is no way in the world it is 50 to 100 times that. No way. And only a jackass would say that when you're on trial for overly hyping your value of your properties, right? But speaking of only a jackass would, so Trump is attacking the judge when it's not a jury trial. That means the judge is going to decide. He's going to be the only person who decides. So in the other cases where he's attacking the judges, it's also dumb in other ways, but at least you could make an argument to the jury, and especially if there's a MAGA person on the jury, the judge is being unfair to me, right? But you can't make an argument to the judge that he's being unfair to you because it's him. I don't know if he realizes that. Now, another really important point that other legal experts have made is that this is the type of case that is very unlikely to win on appeal because so much of it is factually based, and a jury didn't decide it, a judge decided it. So they're very unlikely to say, no, we believe the lower court judge was wrong on the facts. They usually leave the facts alone, whether a jury or a judge decided it, but especially if a judge decided it. They usually appeal based on law, not facts. So he's in a world of trouble. He has greatly alienated the judge in this case, which no other defendant in their right mind would do. And by the way, there's a great question as to why he didn't ask for a jury trial. Remember, all he needs is one MAGA guy. And although this is a civil case, so it's a little bit different, he'd still have to win overall. But overall, I think he's a lot better off with a jury than he is with a judge. A judge just makes rational decisions, generally speaking, and is not swayed by his emotional appeals, his political appeals, etc. It's possible that his idiotic lawyers, listening to their idiotic client, either chose not to have a jury trial, which is just terrible, terrible legal strategy, or forgot to check the box. And yes, it's a little box on the form, and it's not impossible that these blundering idiots forgot to check off the box. So $250 million is probably more than Donald Trump has. And I don't know how this plays out in terms of, okay, he can't have businesses in New York anymore, and he has to. Now the judge has already said that a receivership is beginning for his properties in New York, which he can no longer control. What do they do with those properties? Do they transfer to a different company in a different state? What do they do with his properties that are outside of New York? That's where it gets complicated. But right now, he's on a freight train to bankruptcy. That's my sense of it. And by the way, if Mar-a-Lago is really worth $1.8 billion, then he shouldn't be sweating this. He could easily get a loan from Mar-a-Lago and pay this off, no sweat at all. So Donald, I'm sure you're gonna be okay, right? I mean, I'm taking your word for it on Mar-a-Lago, then you shouldn't be bothered by this at all.
It's possible that his defense team made a calculation that having a jury trial in New York, which is obviously a blue state, would not bode well for Trump. So that's a possibility as well. The incompetence, of course, is another possibility. It's not like we haven't seen incompetence from Trump's attorneys in the past. But I do want to move on to the opposition file that the Trump team put out against Attorney General Letitia James. Apparently he attacked her for a bunch of things that are irrelevant to the trial itself, including the crime rate in New York and the fact that she had previously supported Drag Queen Story Hour. But the most substantive of Trump's attacks, and honestly that isn't a high bar, was his claim that James is biased against him. And this is what the Oppo file included. Letitia James made clear that getting Trump was the motivating force behind her campaign for attorney general, asserted the Trump campaign, citing James's 2018 promise to shine a bright light into every dark corner of his real estate dealings, and warning that she had her eyes on Trump Tower. Trump submitted that James's comments demonstrated a prejudgment of the facts and a political predisposition to the issues she now must manage apolitically. That was a mistake and a typo, and dispassionately. Now, let me just note that I think that this is the reason why you have a significant portion of Republican voters feeling as though Donald Trump actually did nothing wrong, and all of these prosecutions, whether it be the civil case that we're talking about now or some of the criminal cases that he has been indicted in, it's nothing more than a witch hunt. It's politically motivated. This is how you get the Republican base to essentially reject the idea that Trump ever engaged in any criminality. This is the kind of messaging they're getting day in and day out. And I'm not sure if there would be a way to pursue Donald Trump and his alleged criminality without it appearing political. But the one point that Trump makes in regard to this particular case that I think is legitimate is that it took Letitia James this long to file the civil lawsuit. And it does appear, whether you want to accept it or not, it does appear that the timing is political, but I do believe that the charges have merit. Obviously, the judge overseeing this case believes that the charges had merit, which is why he issued that summary judgment just last week. And any other ordinary American who engages in this level of financial fraud would certainly be prosecuted for doing so. So we'll see how this all ends up. But I also have to just say that video that we opened with Letitia James giving him the dirty eye and all of that, then you go to the judge and he looks jovial and excited. It really isn't a good look. So I don't think the camera should have been in the courtroom to begin with.
Yeah, well, look, the camera wasn't supposed to be there. That's why they were escorted out. And I don't know how a judge is supposed to look. I know that Donald Trump looks like a maniac 24/7. So if Anna gets to say it, I get to say it about Letitia James or the judge or whatever. But if you're a Trump fan, you don't get to say how anybody else looks. Okay, so you can't say, "Oh, I'm with the lunatic," but I didn't like the way that Letitia James looked. So by the way, Donald Trump could have had a couple of interesting defenses here. One is the victimless crime that Anna talked about. I don't think it's convincing. I agree with her, but at least it would have been an interesting defense. He could have gone with, there's a disclaimer in there, and he's now belatedly trying to do that. But they mainly argued that the properties really were worth that much, which was impossible to prove. There was no way he was going to win on that. He has different numbers on the tax forms. It's just an open and shut case. I mean, this was butchered in every way imaginable, and he's almost already lost everything. Remember, a lot of the judgments already came in. And I want to be clear about what's left. So the judge has already ruled, yes, there's, based on the numbers, unquestionable fraud. But now they have to rule on, for some of the charges, intent. And intent's important. And if he's trying to prove that he had no intent in inflating his numbers, again, that inflating the Mar-a-Lago number in the middle of this trial is not going to help his cause that he's not doing it with intent. And by the way, in that same angry rant on Truth Social against the judge and against all of these different things, he said, and how come I'm not allowed a jury trial? Because you didn't ask for one, jackass.
It's just, all of it is so exhausting. But this is just one of the cases Trump is dealing with. There's a lot more to get to, including some of the criminal indictments. I now want to move on to that because there is, of course, an indictment that Trump is dealing with in the state of Georgia having to do with election meddling. And there's a potentially big update on that. Former New York Commissioner Bernie Kerik has been subpoenaed to testify in the Fulton County, Georgia trial against Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. This is, of course, the election meddling case that accuses Donald Trump and his co-conspirators of attempting to overturn the 2020 presidential election with a slate of fake electors. Now, what's interesting about this story is that the attorney representing Kerik is saying that, well, maybe, but we got to get some immunity first. And that, of course, has led to a lot of questions in regard to whether or not Kerik could cooperate with prosecutors in this case. Now, I want to throw cold water on the notion that he's going to provide any damning evidence in regard to Donald Trump. I'm going to make my case on that in just a moment. But first, here are the details. Kerik's lawyer, Tim Parlatore, is demanding that his client be granted immunity in exchange for testifying, pointing out that prosecutors indicated in the indictment that Kerik was a co-conspirator in the case. While not named in the indictment, CNN previously reported that Kerik is co-conspirator number 5. So he is in fact facing charges in the Georgia case, okay? Not to be mistaken with the special counsel Jack Smith's prosecution of Donald Trump and election meddling. Now, Fulton County prosecutors allege that Kerik took part in several meetings with lawmakers in Pennsylvania and Arizona, and states that these were states that Trump was, of course, contesting following the 2020 presidential election. So that includes the meeting that he attended at the White House on November 25th, 2020 with a group of Pennsylvania legislators. Trump, Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, and Jenna Ellis were also present for that meeting. Now, the lawyer, Parlatore, wrote, no competent criminal attorney would allow Mr. Kerik to testify absent a grant of immunity. The judge says that Kerik will invoke his Fifth Amendment rights and refuse to answer questions unless he receives written assurance that he will not be prosecuted. The judge also claims that when he previously expressed this demand to the district attorney's office, they told him, quote, if we wanted to indict Kerik, we would have already done so, but refused to put assurances in writing. So that is what he wants. He wants assurances in writing. And finally, he writes in his letter to the prosecutors, to be clear, Mr. Kerik has done nothing wrong and rejects your claim that he is a co-conspirator in any alleged criminal conduct. You made the public accusation, so now you must live with the consequences of Mr. Kerik and presumably all other alleged unindicted co-conspirators invoking their Fifth Amendment rights and refusing to testify. Now, Kerik is not one of the unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators described in Jack Smith's indictment of Trump in the federal 2020 election probe. Nonetheless, Parlatore basically also suggested that Fulton County prosecutors coordinate with the special counsel, Jack Smith, to ensure that he has immunity in that case as well. Now, 2 of the 19 defendants, pro-Trump lawyer Kenneth Chesebro and former Trump campaign lawyer Sidney Powell, are actually set to go on trial on October 23rd. And news just broke before showtime indicating that he is potentially willing to testify against Sidney Powell. But I do not think, and this is just my prediction, that he is going to provide any damning evidence or testimony in regard to Donald Trump. Now, why do I think that? Just 3 years ago, Donald Trump did a big favor for Kerik, who had been convicted of tax fraud and had been sentenced to 3 years in prison as a result. In fact, here's Kerik discussing that on television.
Well, when I answered the phone, the person on the other end said he was getting the president on the line. The president came on, and he started out the conversation saying that he was in the process, as we were speaking, of signing my full presidential pardon, which would expunge my federal record. I did get emotional. I got extremely emotional. I can't tell you exactly what I said, what he said after that, but you know, it was a good day for me. It was a very happy day for me.
Sir, I know you had your former boss and friend Rudy Giuliani lobbying for you. Some people at this network also lobbied. Did you know this was coming, sir?
No. I actually applied for my presidential pardon under President Obama. This has been going on for 4 years. So no, I did not know it was coming. I had no advance notice until the phone rang.
So Cenk, I mean, look, there's no honor among thieves. You never know, but I think it would be shocking if he turned on Trump and testified against him. I really do think this is about Sidney Powell. What do you think?
Yeah, no, right before we got on air, Parlatore, the Kerik's lawyer, went on CNN and he explained, yeah, they have evidence about Sidney Powell, and he said it is not about Rudy Giuliani or Donald Trump. Now, that leads to 2 really interesting conclusions. So first of all, well, actually, one's a question, the other one's a conclusion. The question is the prosecutor in Fulton County going to say, sure, I'll take the evidence against Sidney Powell and I'll give you immunity for it? Or does she think that Kerik was so deeply involved that she doesn't want to give immunity just for evidence against Sidney Powell? Well, they probably have fairly strong evidence against. But more importantly, the conclusion is, it is now official that it is throw Sidney Powell under the bus legal strategy, certainly for some of the defendants, and maybe all the way up to Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump. And Parlatore explained, Sidney Powell was the one person who was saying things without evidence, and that's why the Trump team got rid of her. It's all her fault. So, okay, now we know the strategy. Everybody's gonna blame Sidney Powell. No, how is Sidney Powell going to react to that? Is she gonna release the Kraken, as she famously said she would on behalf of Trump, but now against Trump? I don't know. I don't know what kind of evidence Sidney Powell has against Trump or Rudy Giuliani, but it looks like they're all turning on her.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're gonna turn on her, and it seems increasingly likely that is what their game plan is, I am curious what she's willing to provide in the form of testimony against the co-conspirators here. We'll see. But you know, when someone else's ass is on the line, all of a sudden loyalties don't matter as much. Unless you're in the mob and you don't want to be a rat. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And remember, they all stood at the lectern together, right? But the Rudys and the Sidney Powells and the Jenna Ellises, they were all together. They did this throughout together. And you knew they were gonna pick a fall guy. So it turns out she's the fall guy. But let's see if they all stick to the story, because remember, one of the 19 co-conspirators in that Fulton County case has already cooperated with prosecutors and has pled guilty, and that's Scott Hall. So he's a lower level figure. He's a Republican that helped to tamper with that voting booth, and where they got into and accessed the voting records, which is very illegal. And so we don't yet know what he has testified to behind the scenes. Is he also just on the bandwagon of blaming Sidney Powell? Is that good enough for Fani Willis, who's a prosecutor there? Or has he implicated Trump or others? So Trump's not out of the woods at all on Bernie Kerik or any of the other co-defendants in Atlanta. But for now, it appears that their target, all the co-defendants' targets, as far as we can tell, is Sidney Powell, and trying to make her the scapegoat for all of this.
When we come back from the break, we'll fill you all in on what happened over the weekend in regard to the government funding bill. There is a battle within Republicans in the state house. I'm sorry, not the state house, the House of Representatives. So we'll give you that and more when we come back. Don't miss it.
Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Mark Lee match fishing with you guys. So thank you for joining. They joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. You can do it on tyt.com/join. And Moondragon just gifted 10 Young Turks memberships on YouTube. Love you for your generosity. We appreciate it. Casper, what's next?
Well, big news broke over the weekend in regard to the government funding bill. So let's get into the details.
That's all right if Republicans and Democrats join together to do what is right. If somebody wants to make a motion against me, bring it. There has to be an adult in the room.
I want you to listen to what Hakeem Jeffries said after the.
Oh, Kevin's new boss. Let's hear from him.
Listen.
It was a victory for the American people and a complete and total surrender by right-wing extremists who throughout the year have tried to hijack the Congress.
There you have Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz getting extra salty over the fact that Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy struck a deal with congressional Democrats in order to pass what's known as a stopgap bill or a continuing resolution that will keep the government funded until mid-November. Now, Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy worked with those Democrats. That is why Matt Gaetz is so furious about this, and he is now threatening to do away with his leadership role in the House of Representatives. We're gonna get to that in just a moment, but first let's get to some details about the bill that was signed by President Joe Biden. Now, the measure was approved on a vote of 335 to 91, with 209 Democrats and 126 Republicans voting in favor, and 90 Republicans and 1 Democrat in opposition. Just a quick side note in regard to the 1 Democrat who voted against this, that was Representative Mike Quigley from Illinois, who had a problem with the stopgap measure failing to include any funding for Ukraine. I think it's notable that the defense sector is his 4th top campaign contributor. I'm sure that had nothing to do with the fact that he was so gung-ho in voting against this over the lack of military funding to Ukraine. But let's move on. Then you have the Senate. They also held a vote and they voted in favor of the legislation about 3 hours prior to the deadline. And then the Senate jettisoned its own stopgap measure that contained $6 billion for Ukraine, but then they approved the House version on an 88-9 vote. Now, here's some of the relevant details in regard to what is included in the stopgap bill. A coalition of House Democrats and Republicans voted to pass a plan that would keep money flowing to government agencies and provide billions of dollars for disaster recovery efforts. Republicans who voted against the bill were unhappy about the fact that it left out severe immigration restrictions. How about you guys actually do your jobs and work on a comprehensive immigration reform bill? They can't be bothered by that. Instead, they use government funding bills or lately things like the debt ceiling negotiations in order to include these provisions. Of course, they don't want a standalone bill. They don't want to do their jobs or take any accountability for their failures in actually passing any immigration reform. The bill, though, the stopgap measure did not include money for Ukraine, despite a push by the White House and members of both parties to include that funding. Now, House Democrats supported this anyway in order to avoid a widespread government shutdown. Democrats did not want to be accused of putting the United States aid to Ukraine ahead of keeping the government agencies open and paying 2 million members of the military and 1.5 million federal employees. And look, Ukraine seems to be some sort of sticking point. Congress has approved about $113 billion in military, humanitarian, and economic aid in 4 packages since the invasion by Russia. And Biden has requested another $24 billion. No paid family leave though, so something to keep in mind. On top of that, McCarthy has shown a willingness to work with Democrats, and the extreme wing of the Republican Party is now threatening his leadership role as a result of that. Representative Andy Biggs, for instance, put out a statement saying that instead of siding with his own party, Kevin McCarthy sided with 209 Democrats to push through a continuing resolution that maintains the Biden-Pelosi-Schumer spending levels and policies. He allowed the DC Uniparty to win again. Should he remain Speaker of the House, he asks. And of course, Matt Gaetz, who has used this entire debacle as a way to get as much attention as possible, does not believe that McCarthy should remain Speaker of the House. He says that his leadership role is, quote, on tenuous grounds, and he gets into it a little more in this next clip.
Since the mid-90s, this country has been governed by revolving continuing resolution and omnibus spending bill. And what that means is that America's lawmakers take one up or down vote on the funding of the entire government. That is crazy. That is the reason we're 33 trillion in debt. We want to move to single subject spending bills. So he made that commitment, he broke it. And if at this time, next week, Kevin McCarthy is still Speaker of the House, it will be because the Democrats bailed him out and he can be their Speaker, not mine.
So when do you make this move?
You'll be seeing it this week.
This week, okay.
That's why I came on the show this week.
That's why he went on the show this week. He's planning on pursuing this retaliation against McCarthy very soon. Now, how does McCarthy feel about it? Well, he explains in the next clip.
I want to start, though, on the news this morning from Congressman Matt Gaetz, who says he's going to seek a motion to vacate. He's going to try to oust you as Speaker of the House.
Well, that's nothing new. He's tried to do that from the moment I ran for office. Look.
Well, this time he says he's going to keep going. May not get there before the 15th ballot, but it took 15 for Kevin McCarthy. He says he's coming for you. Can you survive?
Yes, I'll survive. You know, this is personal with Matt. Matt voted against the most conservative ability to protect our border, secure our border. He's more interested in securing TV interviews than doing something. He wanted to push us into a shutdown, even threatening his own district with all the military people there who would not be paid, only because he wants to take this motion. So be it, bring it on, let's get over with it, and let's start governing. If he's upset because he tried to push us in a shutdown, and I made sure government didn't shut down, then let's have that fight.
So Cenk, McCarthy clearly sees himself as the adult in the room and was willing to do what the Republican Party, of course, doesn't really like him doing, which is negotiating with the Democrats. What do you think about this? Do you think that this is going to hurt him politically, especially when it comes to re-election?
Yeah, so let me take it one at a time. As usual, we're gonna give you a nuanced and honest answers to all these questions. So first off, in the beginning, there was many demands that the extreme right wing had in these government shutdown, including absurd things like defund the entire Department of Justice so that they could shut down Trump's cases. Yeah, that was never gonna happen. There's no chance in hell that that would happen. It's insane and absurd that they asked for that. And then there was the standard ask, hey, we don't want to fund Ukraine. We want to give an extreme amount of money to border security. God knows where that goes, and disaster relief. Okay, and then so what happened with those? So disaster relief, both sides agreed to anyway. So that was neutral. The Democrats wanted extra funding for Ukraine, but that was a Democratic request. They didn't get it. The Republicans wanted all those different demands about border security, and they didn't get that yet. So it comes out as kind of neutral at this point. Now, I do want to be fair, even though obviously not a big fan of Matt Gaetz, but his request for single subject bills is not an unreasonable one. And it looks like he's finally figured out that he should stop asking for the moon and the sky and the Jewish space lasers or whatever else that he imagined that he could get in these absurd requests, and just focus on the one thing that makes sense. I've seen him say that now more clearly and focus on that one. And look, that's for him to take to his caucus and figure out if that's how they want to deal with it, et cetera. But this idea that somehow the Democrats won and McCarthy is now beholden to them and working with them, what did the Democrats do? They literally got absolutely nothing out of this. So I mean, other than like anytime the Republicans don't get something absurd that they asked for, they say, well, look at that, the Democrats won again. No, the Democrats didn't win a single thing from this. And in fact, more Democrats voted for this than Republicans. And if I was the Democrats, and I literally had this conversation with the Representative Ro Khanna on Friday when I was in Washington, D.C., and not only me, but he said, Representative Khanna said, yes, the Democrats should ask for something in return, like perhaps a vote on paid family leave. You don't have to guarantee that it's gonna pass, but a very, very simple and doable request of a vote on paid family leave in the House. But as usual, the Democrats asked for nothing and got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, like they didn't want to suffer the same fate that McCarthy was also trying to avoid, which was taking the blame for a government shutdown. So, I mean, I don't know, look, I don't know what to say. It's a stopgap measure. They have about a month and a half or a little less than a month and a half to negotiate what a lengthier government funding bill would look like. Is there a possibility that the Democrats are going to fight aggressively to include provisions that help ordinary Americans? Probably not. So we should know what we have in Congress. We should know what the consequences are of having lacking an organized outside pressure campaign. So the Democratic Party actually feels forced to listen to their constituents as opposed to getting along with their colleagues. It is what it is. This is the system that we have in place right now. This is the lack of power that the progressive left is enjoying as a result of their fragmenting and constant infighting. It is what it is. If we don't have an actual plan to apply pressure persistently and effectively, this is what we're gonna get.
Yeah, and guys, look, honestly, that's why I started Operation Hope. So it's just an effort to collaborate together to create that outside pressure and to come up with good ideas and execute them to do it. In fact, one of the ideas was to interview Ro Khanna and ask him, is it possible? And he told us, yes, it is possible. And so we do get a second shot at this, which is, remember, this is just a stopgap measure for 45 days. In order to pass the actual bill, they still need Democrats very likely, because likely they don't have enough Republican votes because the Freedom Caucus is voting no on everything, right? So if they need Democratic votes, it is super fair, especially if they're gonna get more Democratic votes than Republican votes, to ask for something in return. And in fact, if they have a vote on Kevin McCarthy's speakership, Kevin McCarthy is almost certainly going to require Democratic votes. If that's the case, and they don't ask for a bare minimum vote on paid family leave or another provision or several provisions, then they're nuts. Then that just shows you bad faith on the part of the Democratic Party leadership. That means they don't actually want any of those things. So let's try to create pressure from the outside. We have some allies on the inside, and see if we can actually get something for the country in all of this madness. Because right now, all we have is theater and soap operas. And oh my God, is it gonna shut down or is it not on the next episode of General Hospital? But right now, no one is doing anything for the American people. So it's not too much to ask for one thing for the American people while they have these nonstop nonsense so-called debates, which are nothing but theater.
Well, let's move on to a different angle regarding the government funding bill, because obviously everything kind of happened quickly over the weekend because of the deadline approaching. And Representative Jamaal Bowman has been accused of something that Republicans believe he should be expelled for. So let's get to that story.
I was really appalled of watching Democrats' actions today to delay it, to get to a shutdown. But when we found that an individual elected to Congress would pull a fire alarm, that's a new low. We watched how people have been treated if they've done something wrong in this Capitol. It'll be interesting to see how he is treated on what he was trying to obstruct when it came to the American public.
Strong words for progressive Democratic Representative Jamaal Bowman coming from Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. This is in regard to Jamaal Bowman pulling a fire alarm as the House was set to vote on a stopgap measure to keep the government funded through mid-November. Now, everything happened very quickly over the weekend. We were barreling toward the deadline to fund the government, and Democrats wanted to be able to read the legislation before signing on to it. And so they were trying to stall. So that environment kind of led to the allegations that Representative Bowman is facing now. So it was later determined through a photo that was released that Representative Jamaal Bowman had in fact triggered that alarm. Let me give you more details about it. Well, first off, that's the photo that was released by Republicans. They did not release any footage, which I think is a little weird and questionable. I think it would have been a lot more illuminating if we had footage of what happened. How long was he standing there? Now, the reason why I say that is because of what Jamaal Bowman claims happened and how that conflicts with the Republican Party's interpretation of what happened. According to the New York Times, Bowman pulled a fire alarm in the House Cannon office building, prompting an evacuation of the building and investigations by the Capitol Police and the House Administration Committee. Now, the alarm was triggered at the same time that House Democrats at the Capitol, we're stalling a vote on a spending measure to keep the government operating for another 45 days. Speaker McCarthy had unveiled the bill just minutes earlier, and Democrats were scrambling to read the bill and determine whether to support it. I just love how dysfunctional our government is, right? They just dilly-dally until the last minute, They play games until the last minute, and then there's a piece of legislation that members of Congress feel pressured to vote in favor of before they can even freaking read it. I think that dysfunction is more infuriating than what Jamaal Bowman is being accused of here. I'm just gonna keep it real. Now, later in the day, that bill did in fact pass 335 to 91, with more Democrats voting in favor of it than Republicans, even though Republicans dominate the House of Representatives. Now, Bowman said that he had not pulled the alarm on purpose to delay the vote, as some Republicans have claimed. He said that he was actually rushing to the Capitol to cast a vote, and he came to a door in the Cannon building that would not open. He said, quote, "I am embarrassed to admit that I activated the fire alarm, mistakenly thinking it would open the door. I regret this and sincerely apologize for any confusion this caused, but I want to be very clear. This was not me in any way trying to delay any vote. It was the exact opposite. I was trying urgently to get to a vote." Now, he added that he met with the Sergeant at Arms and Capitol Police after the incident at their request to explain what had happened. And I want to provide one other thing. So apparently there was a sign there that he found confusing, So let's take a look at the next graphic. And Matt Brunig explains what transpired allegedly. So the sign specifically reads, "Emergency exit only. Push until alarm sounds, 3 seconds. Door will unlock in 30 seconds. And Brunig says that Bowman was trying to walk from the Cannon building to the Capitol building to vote. Unusually, the Cannon exit he went to wouldn't open and had this confusing sign on it. He thought it was saying you had to press the alarm to get out. This all makes sense. What am I missing?" But Jake Tapper, while speaking to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over the weekend, made it clear that he ain't buying it. And I gotta be honest, AOC's defense of Bowman wasn't really all that aggressive. Let's watch.
Interesting moment over the weekend when your New York colleague, Congressman Jamaal Bowman, and he's under investigation for this now after Capitol Police say he pulled a fire alarm in one of the House office buildings. Democrats were trying to delay a final vote on the bill. There he is pulling the fire alarm. He says it was an accident. He thought pulling the alarm would open a door. based on the fact that the doors to his right there were locked, and there was a sign that he said he was. I think someone said it was confusing. I'll be honest, it doesn't really make sense to me, his explanation. Have you talked to him? What's going on?
I mean, listen, I think if you actually do see some of the photos of the signs, I think there's something to be said about the government's about to shut down. There's a vote clock that's going down. The exits that are normally open in that building were suddenly closed.
So you pulled a fire alarm?
So what I am here to say is that House administration and US Capitol Police and Jamaal Bowman are inactive, and he's fully participating in saying there was a misunderstanding.
So that was her defense, but clearly Jake Tapper isn't buying the explanation, and neither are opportunistic House Republicans who are using this as an opportunity to call for the expulsion of Representative Bowman. Here's a little taste of what they've been saying.
This is while an official proceeding is happening on the House floor. Well, let's talk about what that is. That's violating a law. That is the exact same law that January 6 defendants are being prosecuted by the Department of Justice every single day. They're rotting in jail every single day. And that is exactly what happened.
This is the same standard that the people from January 6 were held with. I want him to be held at the same standard. As a member of this body, I call for immediate consideration for everyone to look serious into his actions, and that he be held at the full extent of the law.
And I don't think that we should play the two-tier justice system where we're going to go ahead and throw our J6 guys under the bus whenever they came into the Capitol when they committed no violent crime, but yet we're going to let this guy obstruct federal process and just get away with it.
It was during an official proceeding. That is the same thing that they've gone after, those individuals who walked into the Capitol on January 6th. You have to have an equal distribution of justice.
He's a Democrat, radical left lunatic, and he should be prosecuted the same exact way as the J6 people were prosecuted. Bowman went and he pulled an alarm, and you could add riots, you could add everything else, and he did it during a vote. And he should be treated the same exact way. And we'll see what happens, because a lot of people are saying, what are you going to do about J6? I don't think they're going to be disappointed, I can tell you that.
I mean, is Donald Trump even alive or breathing if he's not trying to sell tumblers or some other Trump campaign merchandise? Anyway, these are not serious people, and I'm so sick of the circus. Cenk, I gotta be honest, I don't care about this story at all, okay? I don't care if he did it on purpose or if it was an accident. It might have been an accident. If it was an accident, just read the signs a little more carefully. Who cares?
Yeah, I got you. But once the Republicans attack, you are either going to not defend, right? And then Jamaal Bowman's going to look to be compared to guys pulling off a coup against the American government 24/7 on television, all over television, or you're going to defend him, and then you're in the middle of the circus. So we don't have a choice.
Cenk, we're looking at footage of January 6th. I think it's the same thing. Look at that footage. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So look, if you can't tell that it's not, pulling a fire alarm is not the same thing as a giant riot involving thousands of people where they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence" and they were trying to do a coup against the American government with a fake elector scheme, etc. Well, you have cognitive difficulties, and nothing I say will make a difference to you because you don't even understand words. So if you're that deeply biased, be gone, okay? But for the rest of you, I'm gonna defend Jamaal Bowman on the actual charge. When I first saw this, I thought to myself, I didn't know the defense at all. And I thought, man, that is awfully strange. Why the hell did he do that? And I was really frustrated in my mind because I couldn't think of any reason why you'd pull the fire alarm. And then I thought, he was a principal. Is this some sort of thing about in a school, kids pull fire alarms if you're in an emergency? Did he think that? Then I read the explanation, and the explanation makes perfect sense. So put up that picture again, okay? So, and this is exactly the type of mistake I'd make, and you guys can judge me for it if you like to. So he gets to a door which normally opens for members like him. He's late to getting to a vote. He's trying to figure it out, and he reads the sign. Emergency exit only. Push until alarm sounds. 3 seconds. It makes it sound like, don't worry, the alarm's only gonna sound for 3 seconds. then door will unlock in 30 seconds. It's an instruction manual on what to do with the alarm so that the door opens. At a bare minimum, the world's worst sign. The dumbest, craziest sign I've ever seen, right? So you could say, hey, Cenk, you're a knucklehead. That doesn't mean pull the fire alarm. I don't know which alarm it's referring to. Okay, fine, guilty as charged. I'm telling you right now, I probably would have done the same thing. And so is it embarrassing? It's super embarrassing. Because if you think about it for a second, yeah, it's a fire alarm. Of course, don't pull the fire alarm. What alarm are they talking about? Why isn't this door working? But he's rushing to the vote. So guys, we're gonna have definitive evidence, and the Capitol Police should release this video because they've only released a picture, right? So show us the video. If he goes and he just pulls the fire alarm, then I'm wrong. No, he meant to pull the fire alarm, etc. If he's looking around, reading a sign, looking confused, and then pulls the fire alarm, then you'll know that he was telling the truth. So release the video and let's be done with this insanity. But Anna, what drives me crazy is everything in politics is marketing. So the minute they start attacking and doing this insane false equivalency, it forces us into this conversation. So we're in one nonsense conversation after another, because Republicans scream from the rooftops with insanity every day and make people believe it, and the Democrats usually whimper in return. By the way, another giant difference between Jamaal Bowman, I mean, I can't believe I'm even entertaining this, but he's working with Capitol Police and Sergeant at Arms as we speak right now, and he did from minute one. If you were looking to do anything that was amiss, you're not going to be looking to work with the authorities to get a conclusion on this matter. But hey, if you want to be biased and you want to attack Bowman, you were going to do that anyway, no matter what he did. Keep it real.
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised that some members of the Republican Party are grasping at straws to paint a picture of Democrats that makes it appear as though they engage in the same type of criminality that some Republican lawmakers have engaged in, especially when it comes to attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Maybe not criminality, but certainly bad behavior, the willingness to reject the results of the 2020 election, the fact that they endlessly provide cover for Trump's alleged crimes day in and day out. I mean, George Santos wants to open his mouth about wrongdoing and bad behavior? That criminal, that guy? Yeah, how about you shut up, sit down, and have some freaking decency, get yourself a decent suit if you're gonna be a sitting member of the House of Representatives, a position that he does not deserve as someone who lied to the American people, lied to his constituents, and is a complete and utter fraudster. Disgusting. Anyway.
Yeah, so Anna, look, I thought the same thing about George Santos. I'm like, man, this guy's got some nerve. And like acting as if he's outraged. I mean, Republicans, aren't you humiliated by now? This guy committed how many different crimes, lied to you in every conceivable way, and then you're gonna let him pretend that he's outraged by Jamaal Bowman making a mistake on an alarm? Get out of here, man. And as I was watching that, I was thinking, that's like the perfect symbol of the theater of American politics.
1000%, 1000%.
Right?
Yeah.
Just a total actor. Look, if you're not already convinced, Jonathan Turley, who's now a diehard Trump supporter and Fox News legal analyst, today on Fox News was like expelling him. It's like, that's madness. There's only been 5 members of Congress ever expelled in hundreds of years. And he's like, over a fire alarm? He's like, well, then everybody's gonna get expelled and there'll be no end to this. And so even diehard Trump supporters are like, can you guys please cut the crap and move on, please?
All right, that does it for our first hour, but stick around for the second hour if you want to watch my head explode, because we have a story involving Gavin Newsom, and I will provide yet another example for why I believe he is a massive load of garbage. That and more coming up, don't miss it.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.